Hello, I'm Grayson Evans, and I'm here doing a thing. I don't know what to call it, with a guy, our guest, and he'll introduce himself now. I'm the
Sorry.
worst.
No. No, that was awesome. That was awesome. I'm here doing a thing with a guy. I'm the guy that he's doing the thing with. My name is Aaron Linde. I'm a game developer and game writer. I used to before I made video games and shit. I was a games journalist. I started out at Destructoid and worked at Shack News. I've worked on Gears of War 2, Gears of War 3, and am at this current moment working at Airtight Games as a writer, and that's pretty much it. I also do. I don't really do the journalism thing anymore, but I do. I've written a couple of episodes of the seminal web series Hey Ash, What You Playing, and I'm also an active participant of the Hey Ash stream where we play video games and let people watch us play video games.
He's also the guy.
I'm the guy that he's going to be doing the thing with.
Yeah, so look forward to that in the next few seconds.
Yeah, get ready for the thing.
Get ready for the thing. So, besides Dishonored, what have you been playing?
Oh man, a lot of Dishonored, a lot of XCOM, Retro City Rampage.
Oh yeah.
God, we just on the stream I bought one of the 4 packs of Iron Brigade, formerly Trenched by Double Fine.
Do you know why
On
they
PC.
changed the name?
It's a copyright dispute, I think. I can't remember the exact reason, but I figured that they couldn't get a more generic name than Iron Brigade for that. Trenched wasn't the best name either. It could have been better, but I mean at the same time, like naming stuff nowadays is probably one of the hardest things about creating a product, just because every name is pretty much taken.
I blame all the Atari games. They took every name.
Yeah, man. I was really hoping that when I became a game developer, I could make a game called Baseball, but those motherfuckers
Or
got
Combat.
cornered on that. Or Combat.
Yeah, any verb or
Boxing.
noun.
Yeah.
Pretty much it. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, so XCOM and Dishonored have these two really weird places in my mind where they both promote this sense of like player storytelling, because it's like, oh, look, in XCOM I have my friends that I like, and then one of them died in this crazy way. I'm going to tell you about it. And then Dishonored's like, I killed this guy in this crazy way. Now let me tell you about it. And they're like totally, completely opposite from each other in sort of gameplay, and that's like the coolest thing to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's I think one of the interesting things about single player experiences that's been emphasized over the last couple of years is that these are still authored experiences for the most part. I mean, XCOM less so, but definitely Dishonored is still an authored experience. There's still a narrative being put together. There's still a story that's being told, and there's still there are limitations to what you can do. I think the days of the open world game are kind of at an end. I mean, there's still going to be games like Saints Row and GTA, but I think now people want sort of a blend. They want a middle ground. They want something that gives you freedom with constraints, because complete and total freedom isn't in and of itself in a game sense. It isn't in and of itself a very interesting thing. It's like if I can do absolutely anything I want, usually the first problem that I have is a paralysis of choice. Like I just can't decide on what I want to do, so I just end up fucking off endlessly. If you give me goals to complete, then I have a means of focusing, my activities and focusing and directing myself, and I have metrics for success and that kind of thing. So like, it's now that we're kind of done with the GTA clones, we're like, even games that are very GTA like Sleeping Dogs, they scaled that way down. They scaled Sleeping Dogs way down in terms of the sheer real estate. I don't think any game. Any open world game has been as large as San Andreas since San Andreas came out. And I think there's good reason for that, because it doesn't. You could give me the whole world to run around in, and it won't matter if the things that I'm doing in that space aren't interesting. So right now, I'm seeing a lot of games like Dishonored that give you a lot of room to run around in, but concentrate your efforts into a single contiguous space with standalone like side quests that only apply to that specific level. It's a really nice balance in terms of and one thing to add to that is the fact that by virtue of that balance, you're able to you get a lot of agency and a lot of freedom within those confined spaces, but
Hmm.
everybody has kind of, the reason that it's so fun to swap stories about, a certain level in Dishonored, like the big one that I am frequently talking to people about is
The Masquerade level,
the Masquerade level. Yeah,
the one
the
I
Lady Boyle
totally fucked up
assassination.
all the time because I'm the worst.
But yeah, like people love talking about that one because there are so many different ways that level can go down, and so I mean, there by virtue of those constraints and by virtue of the limitations on the amount of freedom that you have in that level, really awesome stories emerge because people are really creative when they're working within parameters. I mean, just look at Twitter. Like
Yeah,
you limit somebody to 140 characters and they'll find something interesting to say. And as for XCOM, I think what makes the amount of agency that you get in that is more it's less about look at this awesome thing I did and more about hoisted on my own petard, my hubris, I lost all of my crew, especially
my
if you're playing
family.
especially if you're playing with Iron Man mode turned on. Like I think the most interesting stories nowadays are those associated with uh, the big epic moments that we have within these systems, or
Mhm.
the staggering failures and how deeply they affect us. Like when that's one of the cool things about XCOM is that it plays for keeps, and not
Yeah.
many games do that
Well,
nowadays.
so you talked about not having direction, and this is something that I had people complain to me about all the time whenever I try to tell them to play Far Cry 2. I'm like, play it, and they're like, no, all I do is run around shooting at posts and stuff. And to me, it's interesting because it tells you clearly where to go, and it's easy to get there, but just going from A to B because there's like four different roads to take there, like literal roads, they freak out. And I don't know if that's something that developers should compensate for or should just develop for the people who can figure out how maps work, kind of thing.
I
'Cause-
don't think that was the problem so much as it was there's a lot of stuff to do in Far Cry. I think it's the same issue that I have with like games like Infamous, where I'll be on my way to go get the next story mission, and I will I'll be diverted by just the sheer amount of stuff that there is on the minimap that I can do. Like I think uh, a point of frustration for Far Cry for me was that when I was going to do a story mission, and this isn't really a point of frustration, this was just sort of like an interesting thing that came out
Mhm.
as a result of the systems in that game. Is it like I'd be on my way to go do something, and I'd check my map, and there would be a diamond cache nearby, and then I
Oh
would
yeah.
waste 10 or 15 minutes going to look for it. It's just I think it Far Cry 2 has a lack of specific engineered player directed focus the way that a game like GTA does, but it's a little bit different in that in GTA that's the goal, right? They wanted you to have so many fucking different things that you could do that you would ostensibly never get bored with the game.
Yeah, they
Um,
wanted it to be a hobby in a sense.
yeah, you could say that. Yeah, and like in Far Cry 2, I think they were going for something a little bit tighter, but but just by nature of the open world experience, there's some of those things that you just can't avoid, and I think we as game people who play games and like to explore, we like to push systems to the limit, we like to
Mhm.
we like to play around with the toys that are given to us. We I think that's just the nature of it, where you give me a lot of stuff to do and I will get distracted. I will run off the path. I will, if I see something that looks even marginally interesting. In fact, there's an entire school of design, focused around that. Like, not necessarily directing the player, but using different techniques to draw the eye and different techniques to draw
Yeah,
the
like
player's attention.
30 Flights of Loving did that a lot
30
with.
Flights 11 does that. Shadow of the Colossus is pretty much that game in its entirety.
It
Like
really is.
you're not given a clear objective at any point in that game. You're not given. There's no pathing system. It's not like in Dead Space where you can hit a button and actually see the route that you have to take, like actually literally
Yeah,
laid out on the floor in front of you. And so the way that they get you to where you need to go is just by using things like like geographic
yeah.
landmarks to draw your eye. And a lot of the more interesting discoveries that I made in that game were made accidentally just from fucking off. But it's just and like I'm gonna go run over there and look and see what's over there.
Yeah.
But you have to allow the player to draw the line on how it has to be up to the player as to when they're willing to explore and when they actually want to pursue the story goals in the game or the narrative in the game. It's I think where people get frustrated is when the game doesn't allow for switching from one track to the other easily. When it's a hassle to, okay, well, I'm done fucking around and looking for, weapon caches or diamonds or stuff, and I want to get back on, doing what I'm doing. And one of the issues with an open world is that if there's a lot of ground to cover, usually you're way off the beaten path by that point.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
So this is you brought up something interesting because I actually made a video about Far Cry 2 and how it could expand its nonlinear gameplay in a wider sense. And by the time this comes up, people have seen it. And my argument was if they took just the objective to kill the Jackal, no spoilers or anything, and then they gave you a system in which kind of like Dishonor had with the clues and everything, and you kind of figured out where he was through your own gameplay, that'd be more linear, but I don't know if that's something that they should have done necessarily. So what are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
So in the scenario that you're proposing, would it be something like the minute that I start the game, I could possibly just go straight to the Jackal and cut his throat?
Well, in a sense, yeah, I do like you go through the whole amazing world building, drive through the savannah, and then they're like, here you go. And then if you were smart enough, I guess, or skilled enough, you could go and find him and kill him right away, kind of like how in Fallout New Vegas you can go to New Vegas right away and you don't have to deal with the crap on the side. And through your own skill or endeavors, through your own crazy brain, you figure it out. You have the option to kill him right away or do whatever. And you're not totally limited by the pace of what the developers say, but I don't know if necessarily that's right. Like, I'm always second guessing the way I think games should be designed.
Well, I think it's a trade-off, right? Because the amount of agency and liberty you give to a player does have an impact on the amount of or the caliber, or at least the scope of an authored experience that you can deliver to a player. And if the player doesn't care about hearing you tell a story, if that's the kind of player that you're going for, then that's something you could easily do. And if you made it, if I think in the scenario that you're proposing, you would have to, for it to really sing, you would have to relegate narrative way to the back end because you could feasibly strike out on your own and independent of anybody telling you where to go or gathering information or a slow progression of taking out guys that would eventually lead you up the chain to the Jackal. If it was something where you could just through sheer will and determination and less world's greatest detective and more just running in and punching a dude in the throat, if you could just end the game as quickly as it began, I think that would make for a really interesting story that the player tells themselves. But I think you would be the player would be in doing so willingly sacrificing the authored narrative potential of that game. So I mean it kind of depends on what the player's expectations are from the game that they're playing, what they want to get out of that. I mean, some people want to be told a story. Some people want to, go through a campaign.
Yeah.
Other people just want to be left to their own devices. There are games that can do it both ways. I think the games that are providing a satisfying experience to both of those camps are those that, I think it's less about which one do you focus on and more about how do you, what kind of compromise do you make and where do you draw the line? And, games like Red Dead Redemption do it really well, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think player authority is actually really important in certain games, especially since it's because it's this gameplay and narrative partnership. They kind of have to work together because if the gameplay is asking for something and the narrative's asking for something, it totally just fucks up. I assume you played through Call of Duty 4's campaign.
Sure, yeah.
And there's the sniper mission, and you're supposed to snipe the guy, and you shoot him. And no matter where on the body you hit him, you could hit him right in the head. Only his arm's going to come off. And that to me was kind of annoying because it felt like, no matter how well-timed or how curved the bullet is, or if I look at the wind on the car hood flag, it doesn't matter because the story demands that he's alive, and it doesn't matter what I do. I have no agency over what happens, and there's no authority.
Right. Well, and, even in games that it's interesting that you bring that up because I was talking with a friend of mine about that the other day, or not about that specifically, but about that about that conflict, right, between giving rewarding the player for their choices. We were talking, but also giving them the narrative that they're asking for, and we were talking about Mass Effect, but there's a lot of that in Mass Effect. I think Mass Effect and The Walking Dead are the two biggest examples of of how developers are presently um, making that compromise. Because right now
Mhm.
I mean, the industry is in a place in which for if to consider a game cinematic and to consider a game like a AAA storytelling experience, we demand voice acting. We demand fully voiced VO.
Oh yeah.
The consumers generally expect that, right?
Hmm.
And in a game like Walking Dead, you run into a problem of it's a recursive problem. There's no way to actually make every single choice that you make in Walking Dead meaningful. In fact, I would go so far to say, now here's the thing: I love Walking Dead. It's incredible. I haven't played episode 4 because I lost my save, but which I'm really upset about because I hear it's just amazing.
I haven't
And
played any of them yet, actually.
oh dude, play them.
Okay.
They're really good. They're
Oh,
really really good. There's there's a character I have more than once in the last year cursed Sean Vanaman's name. He's a writer and designer at Telltale for creating this character named Clementine,
oh yeah.
who's the, who's the little girl and your ward in Walking Dead. She's a little girl that the player character Lee is taking care of over the course of this game, and she's one of the best written characters in games. Period.
Oh
She
yeah.
is. It's by episode 3, I was ready to stab anybody in the face that so much as, you know, like hinted at threatening her. I'm just like, I will murder everyone in this room.
Yeah. Don't stand near here. I'll
Yeah,
kick you.
yeah, yeah. Just stay the fuck away. I will kill you.
Um.
But anyway, but the problem with Walking Dead is this that and to some extent the problem with Mass Effect is this that when you market a game with your choices matter and we'll be keeping track of all your choices and everything that you say and do matters and has an impact.
Yeah.
But then what you deliver, because you have to keep production and development within scope and you have to keep people on track and you can't, you also everyone who plays Walking Dead starts at the same point. All of those variables begin at 0, but then people make their choices and those start to split and branch.
Yeah.
There is not enough disk space or or resources or time or people
Yeah.
to handle all of the VO, all the resources, all of the writing, all of the permutations that would make all of your choices actually meaningful the way they are in the real world. And in that sense, what you have to do is limit that scope to the choices that you make will influence, getting one line of dialogue over another.
Yeah.
Someone will be kind of shitty towards you or, maybe be a little warmer towards you.
Yeah.
But as of yet, there are a lot of choices in The Walking Dead that it doesn't matter. Like, for example, in the first episode, there's a moment in which you have to, I won't spoil this because for anybody, because I want people to play it. It's a really good game.
Okay.
But you have to choose between saving one of two people.
Okay.
But because the person, one of the people, who are, who you have to choose between, is crucial to the narrative for the remainder of the game.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which choice you make; that person will live and the other person will die. And the result of that choice
That's weird.
who likes you less after that.
Oh.
And yeah, like the people that wanted you, who would want you to save this person, or the people who would want you to save the other person.
Oh, weird.
And that they have to tie up those ends throughout the game.
Yeah.
Throughout the campaign, they have to make sure that those branches eventually coalesce back at the same point. Because if they don't, eventually, like it wouldn't even take that long. It would be episode 2 or 3 that you would have to have completely divergent episodes, completely divergent narratives to account for all the different choices that the player is making in the first episode. So. And which is completely understandable. Again, this isn't a critique of the story or anything. And Mass Effect, I think, is the same deal, where they do a lot of really interesting stuff in terms of making you feel like your choices actually matter. But the fact is,
I cried.
there's pussy.
Ah!
The fact is, there's only so much you can account for in terms of the narrative that you're building. You can't. There's not enough disk space to hold all the different dialogue that you would have to write, record, and produce to make all of those choices actually meaningful. All you can do is, you can change the window dressing a bit, You might even change the ending is where that can actually matter, which is one of the reasons why I hated the ending of Mass Effect 3, because it didn't, at least
Oh
the
yeah.
original. I haven't bothered playing the new one because fuck
Oh,
it.
the new one's actually well, you don't have to play them.
I'll
But
watch it on YouTube or whatever. But
that's
yeah,
exactly what I did, and I was like, okay, that's fine. I accept this.
yeah,
I
yeah.
accept all
But
these things here.
yeah. Now, but that being said, I have really high hopes that Telltale is going to do something phenomenal with
Yeah.
episode 5, which is the final episode of the series that they're doing. I really hope that they, because at that point they don't have to account for future divergences. This is where all roads will end in episode 5. So they have the opportunity to make those roads really unique. Now, I understand that, if they want to keep on the same development cycle that they've had for episodes 1 through 4, they can't increase that scope too far. But I'm really hoping that they take that risk and make it feel like I've done, that the choices that I've at least made up to that point, if they didn't branch in episode 2 or 3, will actually show me a completely different result. Than what you might get, or what Anthony might get, or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I I have some doubts that that'll happen. I'm hoping that it will, but the thing is, I think it's the limitation of the medium. I mean, if we want, I mean, the original Fallout games had all kinds of crazy shit bonkers, resolutions to key plot points of the game itself that you could activate it virtually anytime,
Yeah.
and all kinds of wacky emergent scenarios that and a story that would account for some of even the most obscure choices that you could possibly make. And the reason to do that is because it was all text based.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put, even one writer could do a game like that with enough time, and with 3 years on a project, 2 or 3 years, yeah, you could write anything that you wanted, and you would, if you didn't have to deal with the overhead of asset production the way that we do now in AAA development. That's a possibility, but as it stands now, I don't think it is.
That's so I'm gonna quickly just do 180 here. So you were talking about the character in The Walking Dead, the little girl that I've not met yet, but I'm sure is terrific.
Yeah.
But people were talking about this weird character empathy they've had recently with Dishonored, actually, with the little girl in that. And
Emily.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I found that really weird to me because throughout that whole game, I did not care about Emily at all. She was just this symbol of just the Empire and everything, and that was it. Like I didn't talk to her in between missions or anything. I just didn't care. And like Corvo would run and hug her, and I'm like, "What are you doing? Just run away! Don't talk to her. She's dumb." And I'm trying to think in my head now why I didn't empathize with that character, but I've empathized with other characters in other games, and I don't know if it's because I can't relate to her anyway or what's going on there. But what's difference between her and this one in Walking Dead?
Um, Time, I think, is a big one.
Hmm.
You spend a lot of time with Clementine in The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
Hang on one second. I'm going to take a drink of water here.
unacceptable.
So yeah, it's time. You spend a lot of time with Clementine and Walking Dead.
Hmm.
Now this is just for me. I don't know. People might feel differently. I've heard both ways too. Like I've heard people say that they really liked Emily, and they, she's a cute kid. She's vulnerable. She's in this position of power, and everybody on the everybody in this empire is trying to manipulate her. She's subject to some really horrible shit.
Yeah.
I think so. The one thing that I thought was a really smart decision. There was an article in Kotaku. I don't know if that's where the source material actually came from, but Austin Grossman, who wrote Dishonored, was quoted as and I'm way paraphrasing, but he criticized Gordon Freeman as a mute protagonist, and drew a line of distinction between Gordon Freeman and Corvo.
Hmm.
The core of that distinction was that basically Corvo had a history with these characters. These characters knew him. He was something of a father figure to Emily. He was trusted by the Empress. The Empress was killed right in front of him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history there, which is different from Gordon Freeman, who. But this is what Grossman was saying. He says it's different from Gordon Freeman, who just kind of shows up, and as the G-Man says in Half-Life 2, the right man in the wrong place, right?
Yeah.
I think that I disagree with that. I think I don't want to digress too much here, but I think Gordon Freeman was interesting because in Half-Life 1, everyone he's a colleague and everyone
Yeah.
regards him as such. In Half-Life 2, he's a legend because he disappears at the end of Half-Life 1. So when he shows up, people are like, "Holy fucking shit, it's Gordon Freeman!" Like
Yeah.
I can buy that. I can buy that in Half-Life because in Half-Life 2 because I was there for Half-Life 1 when I was just a guy who graduated from MIT and had a gun and a crowbar.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to buy that in a game like Halo with a mostly mute protagonist who, from the word go, is the most legendary fucking thing. Who is from this program that, oh my god, it's Master Chief. Oh my god, it's the Spartan program. Oh my god.
Well,
Halo insisted on me being a badass from the word go. Half-Life did it a little bit differently. Dishonored does it a little bit differently. I think the way though I disagree with his assessment of Half-Life, I agree with Grossman that the way that he did it, or the way that he and Harvey Smith and the team at Arcane did it with Dishonored is probably the better idea because you give by giving the player character an association and an attachment and an investment, even if the player doesn't necessarily feel it themselves, from the word go with the characters around them. Even if you're not explaining what those relationships are, you're allowing the player to explore those relationships for themselves and piece it all together. It's one of the more interesting things that you can do with storytelling in a game is not explain everything and leave pieces of a world just kind of scattered around and leave it to the player. Not only allow it to be the player's prerogative whether or not they bother with all that information. I think the relationships between Corvo and and Emily and all the other characters, I think, is definitely a part of that. I think the reason that it resonates with some people and not others is because I don't necessarily think that Emily's as well written or as well developed as Clementine because you don't see her that often. You see her when you return to the the pub and you'll talk to her a couple times and you go and save her and all that. Yeah. I think what's interesting about that relationship though is that that relationship provides context for the revenge aspect of the story.
Oh yeah.
That your role isn't one of like righteous justice. You're not a cop, right?
Yeah.
You kind of are in the governmental context, like you're a bodyguard.
Yeah.
So you're performing the role that you served before this whole empire was thrown into upheaval by this assassination. But at the same time, it's established in that first scene with you and the Empress and Emily that you are pretty much a member of this family. That you have a very close connection to this little girl. So even if the player themselves don't feel it, at least there is an emotional context for the revenge motivation that persists throughout the game. And I thought that was a big win. Whether or not that actually carries for people, I mean, is pretty much up to their taste and preference. But for me, it worked. It worked really well.
Well, so you were talking about how like giving pretense to a relationship and everything with a silent protagonist is quite interesting and something that we should really expand upon. But what about one of my favorite silent protagonists is Jack from BioShock because I liked how it slowly dripped forward his relationship with everyone and what he actually was. And I feel like being able to learn more about the relationship as it goes on and determine whether I care myself as it slowly goes through so I don't have to make a split decision right at the start is better, but maybe I'm off base on that. I'm not entirely sure.
No, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, if that's something that you'd like out of a narrative, I think that's entirely within your right to look for and to appreciate. I mean, I think that there are different benefits for either angle. Like, I'm a big fan of screwing with the player. Like, I think that I like betraying expectations. I like making people feel like they've been lied to by the game in a way that's not just conducive to narrative and drama and all that, but in a way that makes the act of playing the game interesting. I like the idea of
Eternal Darkness kind of stuff.
A little bit, but I mean, yeah, a little bit. But I mean, like, Eternal Darkness is a good example. Portal is a really great example of a game telling me that I'm stupid. I like that because I mean, well, in addition to the fact that I think that we do a lot of hand-holding as an industry, we do a lot of focus testing and a lot of hand-holding. I think we're afraid to let players feel like they're not the end all be all. We're afraid to let players feel vulnerable. We're afraid to let players let is the wrong word. We're afraid to make players feel vulnerable. We're afraid to make players feel powerless.
Like AAA games.
Yeah,
now
yeah,
are all
and
power
there
fantasies.
exactly, yeah, and there are some really, really incredible things that you can do by stripping a player of his or her power, and by subjecting them to terrible shit. Like there are awesome emotional things that you can do with that. For years, I've been wanting to. I want a game in which I have to play as a fat guy, like as a fat old guy.
Yeah,
I love Metal Gear Solid 4 because my back problems in Metal Gear Solid 4 had an impact, like had a ludological impact on the proceedings. Like it
yeah,
raises your stress meter. I thought that was fucking great. Um, but I think that insofar as the revelations about the player character are concerned, it ties into that because like I love the twist in BioShock because I mean I didn't much care for the hell was his fucking name, Atlas
Fontaine.
Fontaine, the whole
Yeah,
Atlas is Fontaine thing. I could give a shit. That twist,
yeah,
whatever,
that
I
didn't
don't
matter.
care. Yeah, that didn't matter. The twist about you know making the twist that made the player call into question his or her own agency as a part of the story, I thought is really
Yeah,
fucking interesting. That's
like you're a bad
really
person
interesting.
for just killing these people
Yeah,
without
yeah, because
questioning it.
yeah, exactly. Well, there were scores of gamers who had never before thought about what it is to get what it means to get an objective delivered
Yeah,
to you by the game and to carry it out without questioning it. I mean,
yeah,
I think there were lots of people who before that point in the game had never thought about the implications of that and were thinking about it afterwards. Now that being said, it doesn't really make much of a difference if we as an industry aren't brave enough to put players in those situations more frequently. But I think that if if what you're looking for is the kind of mute hero power fantasy development in which you are allowed to explore those relationships slowly over time and really contemplate it. I think that's a really good opportunity to be lied to. I think it's a really good opportunity to be screwed with, and I think we should do that more frequently. Um, I think that if you really want to explore those relationships between um, the player's expectations and what's actually presented to them, you do have to account for a lot more. That's what I'm looking for. You have to account for a lot more wiggle room in terms of where the player can go with that information and what they can
yeah,
do with it. I think in Dishonored it would have been tricky to, again, going back to the branching bit. It would have been tricky from a resource and scope perspective to allow that to allow the player to make decisions themselves as to what that relationship with Emily is. They do allow you in a sense to do that by either
like when you
determining
come
whether or not.
back,
What's that?
when you come back to the hub and it's like, I want to go hang out with Emily, or
Oh no, 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 no.
oh, okay,
There's only one point in which I really think it does this, and I think it's the ending. Because and I haven't seen the ending for I killed everybody in existence ever.
yeah, neither did I. My
Um,
friend did that because he's an idiot, but I didn't. I
I'm assuming that it's kind of like BioShock, where it's the gloom and doom ending, and I'm
yeah,
sure things probably don't go well for Emily in that setting. That's how they had to account for it. That is the way in which the player can define their relationship with that character. But I don't think the player is ever given an indication that that will be the case
yeah,
over the course of the game. There's no clear causal relationship between the number of people that you're killing and the way in which your relationship with this little girl will be basically presented as a as a final act,
yeah,
as a conclusion to that narrative. I think that there would be interesting ways to do that. I think that they would require drawing resources away from things like combat and level design and that kind of stuff and more towards narrative. And I don't know if anybody in AAA development is prepared to do that. I know I certainly wouldn't be. That's a big job.
yeah,
It's a lot to ask. And I think those sorts of complex relationship dynamics belong in games that are about relationships. I think Dishonored is a game about revenge and about stealth and about
yeah,
kicking. It's a superhero game,
yeah,
really. I mean, and I think that it would have been cool to have those permutations, those narrative permutations within Dishonored, but I can't imagine how they could even hope to finish a game as ambitious as that one.
yeah.
Before
That
the
was
end of
pretty
this
crazy.
console cycle. Yeah, yeah, that would have been pretty wild. And I have no doubts that several developers have an idea in their heads of a game that looks like that, but as to how you achieve it and still maintain AAA, production value, that's the big question right now, I think.
Yeah. Well, one of the games, and this is going to sound pretty silly, but one of the games that I really want more of, like just crazy style, is I want another game that's like Deadly Premonition. I want something just off the fucking wall, just doesn't understand how crazy it is.
Why is that?
Because like when I was playing Deadly Premonition at the start, I was like, okay, this is just bad, and I was slowly going through it, and then it started getting into weird details, like find this key with a squirrel on it, and then you went and found a key with a squirrel on it, and you came back, it's like that's not the right type of squirrel. You have to get a different breed of squirrel, and it's just like this crazy stuff you don't think about, which is they ask you for these objectives that are pretty broad, but then they want you to specify. I don't know. It hurt my head, but also made me think, and it was just really fun. I just love that
Hmm.
game.
Yeah. I've got a couple. I actually sadly never finished it. I only got about halfway through it.
I couldn't finish it either because it was just like, what the fuck? $400 for a lollipop? What the fuck? That kind of shit.
well, like I don't know that game. They're doing a sequel, aren't they?
Oh my gosh, I'm googling it.
Yeah. Like yeah, I having not finished it, I don't know if I can speak at length about it. I just